You are now listening to the fastest show on iSports Radio. My name is Darryl Kinsey Jr. Welcoming you, taking a lap of the extra mile for today, March 9, 2023. And we have just finished round one of the Formula One World Championship. And I think we can already congratulate Max Verstappen on his third World Drivers' and Championship in Red Bull for yet another World Constructors' Championship. We'll get into that in a little bit. NASCAR is heading to the desert once again for Phoenix, but their street race in the city might be in trouble, and IndyCar had themselves a crash fest in St. Pete. And to help me talk about all of that and more, of course, my co-host, Christopher Lehman. Chris?
Well, Darryl, you could not have said it any better yourself, because as you can see by the great big flag behind me, the hat on my head, at the Red Bull camp, we are most certainly celebrating this week. And conversely, the McLaren should be hiding under a rock for the rest of the season because Zach Brown is a clown.
I understand why you would say that. I mean, there's only two fan bases that are happy in Formula One right now. That's Aston Martin and Red Bull. Everybody else is about ready to burn their teams to the ground, which we'll get into here on this program. If you're listening live, make sure to get your comments in. We'll read them out during the show. So we'll go ahead and, of course, get started with the Formula One Grand Prix. Actually, before we do that, a post did come up on Twitter this week, which thankfully I'm still able to see it because I almost lost my account today because thanks lack of two-factor authentication. But this today is actually the anniversary of Joey Logano winning in Phoenix in 2020. And the reason that is significant, that would be the last normal race weekend we would have probably ever, depending on what you want to call it, because later on that week, of course, the global pandemic would shut everything down with COVID-19. And I still remember to this day how everything, just a cascade of shutdown in the sports world that led to where we ended up shutting everything down that weekend after.
Yeah, I think it was the NBA to shut down first.
Yep.
And everybody was kind of, what the hell's going on? Like, what are you doing? And then I don't know, NHL or somebody was next, and then they just kind of, over the course of about 3-4 days, they just all started tumbling. And realistically, luckily, something that I don't think NASCAR gets enough credit for is they found a workaround. Yeah. They were able to stream iRacing and actually get commentators in there and broadcast the races live on TV, which they weren't the best, but you were able to get some legacy people that aren't in cars anymore. You even had Jeff Gordon commentating and racing at the same time, which was cool. Or maybe it was Clint. I don't remember. But I mean, there was some cool stuff that certainly came out of it, but you know, we lost practice. We lost qualifying, the introduction of the competition caution. I mean, we definitely, have seen NASCAR and motorsports as a whole, and really the world as a whole, as we all know, a lot changed a year or 3 years ago. A lot has changed.
Yeah, I think what I remember is we were hearing rumblings of that like the week before. So the Thursday before that, we were talking about, how wild would it be if we came back next week and all the sports was shut down. And you're right, the NBA shut down. I was watching the Big East basketball tournament when it got canceled. As a game was going on. That's how fluid this situation was. There were games being played, and conferences were trying to figure out what they could do, whether they could keep playing. And it got down to where the only thing we had left was NASCAR, IndyCar, and golf. NASCAR ended up shutting down because somebody popped positive when they got there on Thursday. The golf tournament started. They got through round 2. Somebody popped positive for COVID, and that was it.
Yeah. I think, wasn't it Jimmy that tested positive first?
For NASCAR, yeah, but that was much later. They never. It was a actual employee with the sanctioning body that popped for NASCAR. They never disclosed who it was.
Oh, okay.
And then IndyCar, no one popped positive. It's just the race ended up getting canceled out of an abundance of caution. I remember the Australian Grand Prix was also supposed to happen that weekend, and it looked like that was going to go on. They had gotten to like the Porsche practice for the Porsche Cup cars,
Yeah.
and people were standing outside. They could hear the cars going around, but they're like, are we going to be able to be let in or not? And the decision was finally made. Yeah, race is canceled. So
I
it was
remember that.
a fluid situation trying to figure out what we could and couldn't do.
Yeah, I remember that really well now that you say that. I remember it was, all the drivers were there, and you were hearing a lot of whispers on Twitter and stuff, and then finally it broke, and I was disappointed. I got it, but I was quite disappointed. I was hoping with the way things were trending, I was like, maybe we'll get one more race. Maybe, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Maybe we'll get one more, but obviously it wasn't meant to be, and that's okay, because they were able to figure it out and get us a season. But yeah, crazy to think about how different things are today than they were, uh, just three and a half years ago. Much different place.
Yeah, I still wonder to this day what those ratings would have been for that NASCAR race at Atlanta. Would they have gone on? Because I think we were talking about it was shaping up to be like Daytona 1979, where most of the country was snowed in due to a blizzard, or most of the East Coast was snowed in. That popped that big rating for that race and the fight that was in the grass, and that caused a NASCAR boom. We're like, hey, maybe it'll cause a huge boom for NASCAR to carry sports through the pandemic, and well, we'll never really know. Although NASCAR was the first sport to get back.
Yeah, yep, most certainly they were, and yeah, I think they really trailblazed and showed everybody how to get back.
Yeah. And we'll go into this a little bit more next week because next week will have been 3 years ago, would have been that first full week of no sports at all. So that'll be a big part of our show next week. So make sure you listen in. We're going to go ahead and get into this Formula One race now. And as I said at the beginning, there's only two fan bases that are happy this week. Red Bull, because they're on their way to their next world championships, and Aston Martin, because tanking the season last year seems to have worked out because they are now second in the grid. Everybody else is upset. Mercedes, the W14 is even worse than last year. Fire everybody. Ferrari is, well, Ferrari. But I think, Chris, we have to start our tour of vitriol towards McLaren as they showed up with a car that is about as aerodynamically sound as a brick. Norris had issues that forced him to pit 6 times. Nick DeVries did not finish the race at all. They don't score points. Norris finishes 2 laps down. But hey, Daniel Ricciardo's not there anymore.
Yeah, problem solved. They successfully got rid of their scapegoat, and now look at them. I say good for them. You 100% reap what you sow, and I cannot wait to see McLaren continue to falter. And I hope that they don't score a point this season, and I hope Oscar Piastri works out well.
I hate this for Oscar Piastri because, let's be honest, Alpine was him and hawing about him. He needed to find a place to drive. And I'm sorry, I said Nick DeVries. I didn't mean Nick. I meant Oscar Piastri. I'm sorry about that. But Oscar needed to find a place to drive, and he didn't want to sit behind the garage anymore. I understand that. But man, he picked a terrible time to go to McLaren. And Lando Norris, he is going to rue that day he did not sign that contract. with you guys at Red Bull, because instead of signing with them and possibly being in that second Red Bull, he took that back to leverage a long-term contract out of McLaren. Well, he got what he wished. He's got to deal with this mess until 2026.
Yep.
I don't think he's going to make it.
I don't think so either. I think he's going to figure out how to get out of his contract and do what he's got to do. Similar to with Oscar Piastri and everybody else that made a ton of bad decisions. You reap what you sow. I mean, yep. You wanted to be the big dog at McLaren, and you are. You're getting paid. You're getting paid very handsomely to drive a 19th place car. So, good for you, Lando. I don't think that he would work out in that second Red Bull seat to begin with, anyway. I just don't think he. I mean, we all know, right? Mercedes and Red Bull, you are playing second fiddle to that first car if you're in the second car. Yes. Ferrari, they tell you to, but you don't have to. You can just do whatever you want. But I don't think Lando would work out at Mercedes if he's not driver number one. I don't think he's going to work out at Red Bull if he's not driver number one. He chased the bag, and usually the teams that can afford to shell out all the money or can afford it for a reason. So,
yeah. Well, here's the thing with McLaren. Zach Brown came in trying to turn that thing around. And yes, he's expanded them to racing in IndyCar. He's doing some things with United Autosports as well. That Formula One program is not performing at all. They're supposedly in conversations with Honda for an engine deal to become a factory team again. We'll see how that happens. The last time those two got together didn't really go that well. So I don't see how that would work out at a second time or a third time at this point. But you've got to kind of look at that, how everything's gone with McLaren, how Daniel Ricciardo lost his job, how Oscar Piastri got the team or got that ride. It's really turned a lot of fans against Zach Brown, and it starts to beg the question, is he the problem over there? And by he, I mean Zach Brown.
I would say so. And actually, it's kind of funny. I'm going through just kind of filling in some of the data for the race at Las Vegas that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And I actually just get to Ty Gibbs' name. And Zach Brown, we kind of touched on it last week, the Joe Gibbs parallels. And Zach Brown, just the way that the drama unfolded around what drivers they're putting in the car next year kind of reminds me of the Ty Gibbs, Kyle Busch dilemma. Mm-hmm. You know, you got the guy in-house that people don't really want there, and you've got the young guy coming up the ranks that, you know, is good. You know, Ty Gibbs, you can't take away the fact that he's a good race car driver. But you're getting rid of the old proven you're getting rid of a high seal or a high floor for a high ceiling, low floor, high ceiling. And the villain factor that Zach Brown has is very similar to how few people feel about Joe Gibbs racing right now. That's like the best parallel I can come up with.
And the funny thing is the old JGR driver got vindication with the win, Kyle Busch, while Ty Gibbs is, I don't want to say he's struggling. He's being a rookie in the Cup Series, which is you're just trying to finish races and fill a notebook. Unfortunately, we won't get to see the same sort of comeuppance for Zach Brown and McLaren because Daniel Ricciardo's stuck doing TikToks in the back of the Red Bull garage. So hopefully he can find a ride somewhere. I mean, Andretti is trying to start that team for 2025 or 2026. Hopefully.
We'll see. Yeah. We'll see what happens when We'll see what happens when Andretti comes up with $600 million and Formula One decides to try to up the number again.
Yeah. At this point, by the way, that's heading towards an antitrust lawsuit, I think.
Yeah.
Like, the goalpost moving, this is going to get litigious.
Yeah, it's going to get ugly. Yeah. Hands down.
Yeah. And it does not make sense when this is one of the first actual interests you've had for a new team in decades. So, Formula One always known how to shoot itself in the foot. But speaking of shooting themselves in the foot, Mercedes. What do you do when the package that you brought last year doesn't work? Well, you double down and hope it works. I don't know why I have that fork. But did it work? Absolutely not. They finished 5th and 7th this week. They got jumped by their customer team, Aston Martin, as Alonso finished 3rd and Lance Stroll finished 6th. If Lance Stroll had 2 working wrists, we'll get to that later, he probably would have finished in the 4th spot. Mercedes has hit the panic button. Mike Elliott has basically been told, fix this or you're not going to have this job anymore. And it's gotten so bad that the previous technical director, James Allison, has been brought back to work on this car. Mercedes is in crisis mode right now. And I'm going to be honest, Toto's got to go. You cannot follow up 2021 Abu Dhabi where, let's just keep it a buck, they got cheated. I don't know why they got cheated, but they got straight up cheated by how the rules were implemented in a way that they have literally never been implemented before. 2022 was supposed to be your revenge year. That was the W13. People gave you a pass because of new regulations, a hangover from what happened, but they were expecting this year to be the revenge year. You go into 2014 bringing the same side pods that Lewis Hamilton told y'all didn't work and expected different results. The results were different. They were worse. Your customer team in Aston Martin is now in front of you. Ferrari, if they weren't, well, Ferrari, would be further in front of you than they were, or than they are right now. This car has issues with high and medium speed corners. You want to know why? There's too much turbulence in front of the front tires because the car doesn't have side pods. Gee, I wonder who could have figured that out. And now they're going to a track in Saudi Arabia, which has a bunch of what, Chris?
Terrorist attacks.
You're not wrong. But I meant medium and fast speed corners, but that's true too. Oh, that just derailed my
I'm sorry.
That just derailed my rant. My point is, Mercedes is screwed this year. They might not score at Saudi Arabia. I'm just going to keep it a buck.
Yeah, I mean,
they could finish outside the points.
I think the safest thing to say is Mercedes has they have pushed the panic button.
Oh, they've slammed that thing.
They did not push it last year.
Mm-hmm.
They refused to push that panic button last year, and we get to qualifying, and you can already see that they're sweating it out, right? They got the panic button right there, and they're just kind of looking at it. We get to the finish of Bahrain, and George Russell is over there slapping it until, like the Staples "that was easy" button, that thing's already out of batteries.
Yeah.
If it said panic. I mean, these guys are publicly falling apart at this point.
Yeah, I've never seen it this public with them. I mean, Toto called it the worst race since they've been in Formula One. George said Red Bull's going to win all the races. You've got Lewis calling out the team, and he rarely does that, even though he could have last season. He came out and said, demanded accountability because he told them this zero pod design was a flaw. And it is the fatal flaw, I believe. And you can see that with how Aston Martin jumped up to second. They're supposed to be bringing new changes to Imola. I think that might be far too late. Because the other teams are going to develop. You're basically starting from scratch. And you got to hope that those developments give you the pace, which they're looking for seconds, not tenths. I don't think you can find seconds in an upgrade package, especially trying to find, see where how many they finished behind, 50 of them, because that's how far back Lewis finished on Sunday. Now, I don't think he's cooked, but this car definitely does not work. And they've got to fix it, and I don't think they can.
Yeah. I don't know what there is to say other than put this car in the dumpster, and you need to fix your shit for 2024.
I think at this point you are getting ready for 2024 because you there's no way you're going to make headway in 2023. You're already 9 months behind.
You need to just do whatever it is. The first thing they should do is you're really not losing anything by developing side pods, even if they're not the best. You just develop some side pods and stick them out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's step one. It can't cost that much to develop a shitty pair of side pods.
Yeah.
You get those on the car, and then you start refining. But you already missed the boat. I'm sorry, but Red Bull is not going to pull a 2022 Ferrari. They will not do that. And if they do, on the off chance that happens, Aston Martin is right there to swoop up and give them a fight. But I think right now we're talking about a three-way fight for second between Mercedes, Ferrari, and Aston Martin. And I think Mercedes...
I think it's a two-way fight. I think Mercedes is in that fight.
And I think Mercedes is correct. I think they're going to hang in there for quite a while, maybe half the season or so, but they're going to fall into that fourth or fifth spot.
Yeah. They're absolutely going to fall down the order. And they have no one to blame for themselves because they keep playing with a system that straight up doesn't work. And there's nothing really you can do about it. And as we see, Ferrari had its own issues. Leclerc retires early due to a engine issue. Sainz is nowhere to be found because the tire degradation on the Ferrari is yet again bad compared to the Red Bull, which just the Red Bull doesn't wear tires at all. No. That's what happens when you have Adrian Newey design the aerodynamics of your car. It's very easy on the tires. Ferrari still hasn't figured that out, so that's why Sainz was nowhere. But I just don't see Ferrari being a contender again. Not just because Red Bull absolutely smashed it again with their car design, but Ferrari can't stay out of their own way. At this point, look, Binotto's gone. At this point, it's a culture thing. With that team that they've got to fix.
I agree. You absolutely, you know what your issue is, and last year all Ferrari had to do was just not implode. They had a champion. They had a championship winning car. Mm-hmm. And realistically, they could have dealt with the mechanical failures. They could have at least taken the fight to them, but it was the strategy that is what lost them the championship. And I'm sorry, but what we saw this past weekend, Carlos Sainz was uninspired, to put it best.
Yes.
That's just putting it. That's spinning it as positively as I can. Um, they have issues this year. Ferrari still does. I don't think changing uh, team principles was enough. I think you need a real shot throughout that whole organization.
They're going to need to go through and have a complete team and culture reset, I think, if they want to be successful. Because at this point, what they've got is not good enough.
Yeah.
And we saw Leclerc fall out, Oscar Piastri fell out, and Esteban Ocon. Oh boy, he ended up falling out the race, but what was with the penalties? My guy. He had to serve a penalty at the beginning, a 5-second penalty. I think it was for avoidable contact. His crew touched the car too early, so then he had to come back to do a 10-second penalty because they didn't serve that penalty correctly. And then the pit road speed limiter was set 0.1 of a mile an hour too fast, or a kilometer too high. So he got another 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. I think that's a modern era record for pit lane penalties in a single race.
Yeah. It has to be.
So that was crazy.
It's one of those things is as it's going on and they're like making people aware of this, you start thinking to yourself, like, come on. Is it like it's not April 1st? Let's cut the shit. Tell us what's actually going on. Just because it was a tragic comedy.
Mm-hmm.
That was Ocon's race. And yeah, Bahrain just as a whole was a weird race.
It really was. Except for Red Bull, absolute domination. Not much to be said there other than Max Verstappen is a really good driver. Checo's a solid number 2. And they're probably going to dominate most of these races. And that makes you really look at the schedule. What is going to be the real shakeup? We've got listed here as Monaco really the only wild card. Probably because it's going to depend on the weirdness of qualifying to decide that race, because we know there's not going to be a single pass in the actual race because, you know, the glorified go-kart track that it is. This could be a season. I know sorry, I drew a blank. George Russell said that Red Bull could win every race this season. Statistically, that is impossible, but unless we get some real Baku levels of chaos, I don't really see anybody beating them this year.
Yeah, I think that's really the only race on the schedule we're looking at and saying, hey, there's a chance they don't win this is probably Monaco.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because their car looked good, all right, and they obviously took 1 and 2, but we all know how Monaco is. Anything can happen qualifying, and yeah, I think that is the field's best chance at winning a race, short of some freak accident with wet weather. Or Valtteri Bottas just taking them out, going bowling. I don't see anybody unhinging them, and I actually saw on TikTok that Max could win it in Zandvoort. That would be the first race where if he scored max points every race, he would have it wrapped up in the Netherlands. And then for the last 7-8 races of the year, they said put Daniel Ricciardo in the car and see if Red Bull can just grab 1, 2, and 3 in the drivers.
That would be absolutely miserable if the championship was done with 8 to go. That's like And with the schedule now, that's like 3 months of races that do not matter in the grand scheme of things, unless you're looking at the minor places.
Yep. I wouldn't mind seeing Daniel in a car for a decent stretch, just to see what you got with him. Right? We haven't seen him in a good car in quite some time, and it'd be nice just to see if he still got it. But at the same time, that'd be a boring season.
It would. I mean, it's functionally over. That's all of September, all of October, all of November, including, the return of Qatar, the first race at Las Vegas. And there might not be a lot of people tuned into those races because the championship is going to be long over. Like, unless you're trying to see Max break a record for most wins in a season, what is there that's going to draw the fan in?
That's precisely it. It's just to watch records get smashed week after week.
Yeah. At that point, that's all you're looking at. We talked about this even when Mercedes was dominating. It's fun, but at the same time, when there's no challenge, it's like, well, this is over. Now what?
You don't even have to turn the TV on.
All right. And for a little while there, I wasn't. It's like, you look at the results. Oh, Lewis won again. That's where this is getting. Yeah. And that's not good for this sport. When we got one team just absolutely dominating and nobody else is even close. Yeah. Like some people say, well, Ferrari in the mid-2000s, but McLaren was there. Williams was there. It's just Michael Schumacher was him and showed he was him every week.
Yeah.
So that was really more of a driver thing. Those were 3 really good cars. It's just only one team had the all-time great. So, except for the F2004, that car just absolutely, that car could probably win against these cars. That car was far too good. But, yeah, it's, and I don't want to be sour grapes as a Mercedes fan, but it's just this problem that Formula One has had for a while is there's only one team up here, there's a couple of teams below it, and then everybody else. This new package was supposed to fix it, and we might see the new rules with the cost cap maybe fixing it with what's going on with Aston Martin and whether or not they sandbagged last year to get the 7th place the 7th place bump up in in time for Lord have mercy. Wind tunnel. God. My brain is not working today.
Well, they're building that brand new wind tunnel. So I think it's well theorized at this point. The Aston Martin sandbag last year to maximize their development time this coming year, which would be this year now.
And it worked.
And I think they did. With what we're seeing now, you do not make those gains in one season. You don't.
No. Either we're going to see the first big penalties of the cost cap, or they absolutely punted last year to get ready for this year.
The other thing is they have Dan Fallows now.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, that's not 6 places on the grid. Not in one off season.
Yep. And he is the aerodynamicist over there and one of the Adrian Newey understudies.
Probably the
great things.
The understudy.
Yeah.
I think he is the prodigy understudy.
Yep.
But nobody understands floors like Newey does. And that's what this car is based on. If you don't have the floor right, you're not right.
And that's really the situation with these ground effect cars. You've got to have that floor right, or you're not going to win anything. And Aston Martin looks like they've got it right. Red Bull definitely has it right. And you see where they are on the schedule. So this is how the Bahrain Grand Prix wrapped up. Max took the win. On second, I don't know, for some reason it says Max Verstappen, but that was Sergio Perez. We know that. 11
sorry.
seconds back. And Fernando Alonso was 36 seconds back. And the points are how they finished in the top 10. So I can find where the points are for our drivers. There they are. With Max, Perez, and Alonso in the top 3. Then Sainz, Hamilton, Stroll, George Russell, Valtteri Bottas, Pierre Gasly, and Alexander Albon, your top 10 points scorers. And obviously the guys that finished 10th, or 1 through 10 in the race.
And something that we didn't talk about, but heads up play by Alfa Romeo to steal that fastest lap from Pierre Gasly, because Alpine had it. Alpine, how American of me. Alpine had it, and then they pulled Joe Granu in right at the end, and on lap 56 out of 57, he pulls in the fastest lap, steals that point back. That type of move right there is the move that you can change where you finish in that Constructors' Championship, and there's a lot of money on the line, as Will Buxton would say.
Yeah. A lot of money on the line, a lot of prize money, a lot of prestige that people are going for here.
As Will Buxton would say, if you score more points, you finish ahead of your opponent.
Y'all have got to stop giving him crap for how he talks in Drive to Survive. That wasn't made for us. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that on the other side.
If you qualify first, you have 19 cars behind you.
We'll talk about Drive to Survive in a minute. We're actually going to take a quick break. Taryn in the chat. Basically, everyone outside of Max Verstappen of Red Bull sucks, right? Not really. It's just Max is this year's him. To steal a phrase from Gen Z, he's just better in a better car than everybody else right now. And no, it's not going to be good for Formula One. Just like how it wasn't good when Mercedes was dominating or when Ferrari was dominating. It's not that fun when only one team's got a shot at it. But we'll take a break. When we come back, we got more F1 conversation. Plus, don't get too attached to that street race in Chicago. That might not be happening. We'll talk about it on the other side of this break here on iSports Radio, your feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And we are back here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. This is the Extra Mile. Darryl and Chris here with you this evening. We're going to continue with Formula One and then jump into NASCAR here as we continue on with the program. Drive to Survive Season 5 has come out, and I haven't heard that many great reviews. I think the bloom is coming off that rose, and I think it's because of what we've got written here. There's a lot more fabricated drama in Drive to Survive than I thought there would be. And also, there was a bunch of stuff they just didn't cover. Brazil wasn't mentioned. They didn't mention anything about Sebastian Vettel and him retiring. You know, they didn't do anything about that in Abu Dhabi. It really feels like in a sport that has genuine drama on a weekly basis, they've decided to go the reality TV show with it. Route with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a real shame because Formula One does a great job of giving us enough drama without the fabricated stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I now my wife and I are 6 or 7 episodes in, so we're not all the way through yet. So maybe maybe there are some things, but I mean, did they cover Japan at all?
I think they may have. I need to look
Uh,
into that. I don't remember if Japan got mentioned.
but I mean, this season was halfway decent, um, but so far at least, we still have the Will Buxton telling us the most obvious things in the world, which I get it. It's not meant for us. If it was meant for us, it would come out sometime uh, the between Abu Dhabi and Bahrain, not after testing before the first races of the season.
Yes.
Um, it's it's released when it is to get as many new watchers in the sport as possible, and I get it, and I'm on board with that. Right? That's how you've got this American surge, is because you watch the show and then you look it up, you Google it, and you're like, oh shit, they are literally racing next week. Let me tune in and see what this is about. So I get it. Um, but yeah, so far though, I think the only storyline that's not played out and tired is anything Max related, and that's because he negotiated. I believe that he negotiated his own editing, so he gets
Mm-hmm.
to control his own storyline. Now, I think there's most people would do not have the pull to do that. I mean, I think there's maybe 3 or 4 drivers on the grid that could do it.
Him,
Um,
Lewis, Alonso, and I think that's it.
you could make a case for Leclerc, but I don't think so. Not
I
yet.
don't think so. No.
Not yet. Um, and then the team principals. I think Christian, Toto, they certainly could if they wanted to, but I don't think anybody else has that type of pull. Um, but it would just be nice to see them just cut out the fake drama. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially we just finished the episode about Daniel Ricciardo, and oh my god, that was just so painful to watch. Not because we're Daniel Ricciardo fans, because we are. I think everybody's a Daniel Ricciardo fan if you're a Formula One fan.
Mm.
Um, but oh my god, just the way that they made that drama so they were just able to stretch it out so long,
Yes.
and it was frustrating. I did I That's just the probably the best word that you can describe their storylines as a whole, is just frustrating.
And it's just unfortunate that it's going this way, and I wonder how long that show's going to keep going. Definitely some of the drivers have spoken out of it. I know Lando spoke out of it, but one of the things that caught me was when they were introducing Mick. So they're at Baku, and they're playing up Mick getting lapped by
Oh,
Verstappen like it's the worst thing in the world.
oh yeah,
That happens.
almost every race.
Yeah, like they're like, it's so embarrassing. Dude, that happens every week. Someone gets
Yeah,
lapped. Mick isn't anybody different. Especially in the
remember.
Haas.
Yeah,
Like,
my my wife and I were watching that, and I was like, "Are they really trying to play this up that Mick is racing Max? What they're out of a 23 race season, they're going to finish on the same lap 3 times,
maybe.
maybe not this year for sure."
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, like if I was genuinely like, I how did this make that off? How did that make it off the cutting floor? Of all the drama that's fabricated, that might be the most egregious.
Yeah. Like, trying to play up Mick and how that was going on was just, that was just weird. I hope if this show continues, they get the editing back down to some sort of reality, because the way it's going now, it just makes absolutely no sense. Before we move on, we'll touch on the Mercedes and Red Bull Flash. We'll probably save that for next week, because we don't have any Formula One conversation as far as race next week. But we do want to pass on our condolences to FIA President Mohammed bin Sulayem. His son Saif passed away in a motor vehicle accident today. That was reported early this morning, which is really sad to hear. I think Saif also did some racing of his own, so sad to hear that unfortunately he's passed away.
Yeah, so I did a little reading on it today, and he was in F4, in F3, and he actually raced with Logan Sargent. And I think maybe either DeVries or Piastri, but he was definitely in the younger ranks, or well, in the lower ranks with these younger drivers, and yeah, absolutely passing our condolences on. It's a tragedy to have to bury your kids. So yeah, absolutely torn for him and his family.
Yeah. Ben is taking some steps back after a little bit of unfortunate controversy earlier this year with him and Formula One, so we haven't seen him much as far as the day-to-day actions of the sport, but we wish him and his family the best. And we will shift gears here to NASCAR, the race in Las Vegas, the Pennzoil 400, won by William Byron. Stage 1, won by William Byron. Stage 2, won by William Byron. The podium,
most laps Slav.
William Byron. Got to the snack bar first, William Byron. Byron, Larson, Bowman were your podium in that race. Hendrick, I can't say they're back because this version never left, but they are really starting to get back towards that mid-2000s flair that they had, where they were absolutely dominating this sport.
Yeah, and you know, we talked about last week with Larry about how we talked about the differences between JGR and Hendrick, and how JGR is holding on to the old guard and Hendrick embraced the young blood, right? And Hendrick went through a couple years of not having the results that we're used to out of that organization. And now look, we're looking at this right now in front of us. We're looking at our top three finishers. I see 3 Hendrick Motorsports drivers. I see our stage winners. 2 Hendrick Motorsports, the same guy, but twice. We're seeing laps led. I mean, Hendrick as an organization has led 277 laps this year. And that is out of a total of 683. So they've won, just do the math here quick, like 40 some percent of the races, 40.56% of the races. Yeah. That's a lot of laps. Yes. Hendrick is most certainly being rewarded for developing their drivers with this new car. And if I'm another team, any other team, I'm kind of looking at that and saying, oh shit. Especially if I'm Gibbs or one of these other really high dollar organizations that is Gibbs is bleeding talent. We're going to talk about that in a couple minutes here. It's one of our other talking points. But yeah, these other organizations not named Hendrick are in trouble. And what I should say is organizations not named Hendrick, not named Trackhouse, and should be not named 2311, but their sabotage is not the fact that they're developing their young talent. It's the fact that the people developing their talent kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Like
and
everybody
Tyler just had a bad couple of weeks, but
very unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I mean, basically what I'm saying though is these young guys, you need to develop them for a couple of years in the car. All the Hendrick guys came in right before this next gen car. They got acclimated to the old car, and they're developing with this new car, and it's going to be a Hendrick dominated probably next 4 to 5 years while this young core is still together. And none of these guys are in their prime yet. These guys are all 3, 4, 5 years away from their prime.
To steal a Gen Z phrase, you got to let them cook.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't let people develop, you know, you get a situation where JGR, where half their young talent is winning races with other teams. You know, Joey Logano just won 2 championships for Penske. Eric Almirola, who was with that team, he hasn't really won championships, but he's won races for Stewart Haas Motorsport or Stewart Haas Racing. Daniel Suarez is at Trackhouse winning races.
Eric Jones has won a race at Legacy Motor Club now, but back when it was Petty.
Yeah.
And it's not official yet, but I am 100% convinced Christopher Bell's gone next year. And he's
gone as well.
He will be in the 4 car.
Yeah. And when you're continue.
I was just going to say, absolutely no doubt in my mind that he's in the 4 car next year, or whatever they rebrand that car if he decides to move on from the 4. I think he likes Christopher or Ty Gibbs is in the 54, but Christopher Bell, I think he runs the 54, or maybe it's the 57 in dirt. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him switch to one of his dirt numbers if the 4 becomes, if they rebrand the 4 in a similar way they did the 24 car to the 5, and then the 48 car to whatever. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a new number on that 4 car next year.
Yeah, and when you're a team like JGR, you're sitting there, you are absolutely bleeding talent. That's not good for your future. I mean, Denny Hamlin's going to retire eventually, so somebody's got to go in that car. Ty, we don't know how good he's going to be in Cup.
And you lost Brandon Jones. You lost Brandon Jones.
Yeah. He would have been the guy to replace him, and now Brandon Jones has moved on. So
he's in the Chevy pipeline.
Yeah. Which is funny where they all end up.
Yeah.
All the former Gibbs guys end up at Chevy.
With the exception of Logano, but
yeah. And Bubba, they ended up getting him back, but he went to Chevy.
Yeah.
And then came back because Denny gave him a job, but
I think that probably just leads us into part of the reason they are losing this talent. Darryl?
Oh, by the way, William Byron.
Yeah.
William Byron drove for KBM.
Yeah.
And then ended up at Hendrick.
And now he's back for KBM again in a couple weeks.
Yeah, for trucks. There's a culture problem at JGR, which is weird to say because they're the God and Christianity team. But there is a serious culture problem over there that all of this young talent is just gone every year.
Yeah.
And it might have something to do with the restrictions they put on guys. Hendrick Motorsports, they've got no restrictions on off-track activities. That kind of bit them this week. We'll get to that. But they don't really have anything. Byron has to ask permission to race dirt. Basically needs to tell Rick where he's going.
And that interview, so I picked that up from the Rubbin' Is Racing podcast. So Barstool picked that back up, and they had William Byron on. And he basically said, because they asked him about this, right?
Yes.
Chase got hurt. Is that going to change what happens in the future? And he goes, no, Rick is really cool about letting us do what we want to do. He goes, I like running late models. So I just asked Rick, hey, do you mind? And Rick says, nope, not at all. HMS lets their driver do what they want. You see all 4 of their drivers run dirt all the time. Alex Bowman owns a dirt racing team. They're most of them are at the Chili Bowl. And
Larson's winning everything in a dirt car he can get his hands on.
Yeah, and Chase, the teams can restrict these guys from snowboarding. They really can. If they don't want you doing any physical activities, they can restrict you. And drivers do not like that. And that is the sole reason Christopher Bell, I am 100% convinced, will be at Stewart-Haas next year, because Tony Stewart, if you don't have dirt experience, don't plan on getting in his car. And if you don't want to run dirt races when you're on an off week, don't plan on getting in his car, because he wants his drivers getting out there, getting as much experience as in many cars as they possibly can.
And he's got his own dirt series, the All-Star Circuit of Champions. Of course, now he's out doing a top alcohol top alcohol dragster this year. Unfortunately, he did not run well in the Baby Gators last week. That car, they've got some issues with getting the traction down that they've still got to get figured out, but Tony's going to drive everything, so he allows his drivers to drive everything. And you mentioned, when we were coming on, Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, they don't put restrictions on their drivers either. And Kyle actually called Joe Gibbs Racing's restrictions BS, because he ended up getting hurt in a Gibbs car the year he won the championship.
Yeah, so he came back with steam, and he won a championship. And I'm just looking at I'm looking at the SRX, right? Because that's a great. Last year we had Chase Elliott running it. We had Ryan Blaney, Clint Boyer, and I see Denny Hamlin is on here for one, and that's surprising to me. Mm-hmm. But maybe because it's asphalt or something. But even if you just look at other stuff like that, I mean, you do not see Gibbs drivers there. And unfortunately, for those of us that like the Chili Bowl, we were robbed of seeing Christopher Bell at the Chili Bowl this year.
Yep. And he would have had a great chance to win it, because Kyle Larson is kind of protesting it until they get the purse up for the drivers.
Yeah. And, it all goes back to Coy. Coy was the one who Christopher Bell would get his permission from. Coy is the one who is okay with the drivers doing things outside of NASCAR. Mm-hmm. And he's no longer with us. And as a result, that organization is going to continue to bleed talent, because especially these generations coming up, like even us, Darryl, I'm 30. But if my work ever told me, hey, you can't go snowboarding, not that I get out much anymore these days anyway, but if my work said, hey, you can't go snowboarding, we don't have any way for you to get to your desk if you break your leg. We're a farm. We don't have to be ADA compliant, but we're getting there. We're building a new office to be ADA compliant, but right now we're not. So my work, they could say you can't do it, and I would say that that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Right. And so these younger people coming up, they are not going to stand for the same driver restrictions that these teams have been getting away with for the past decade or so, and maybe even longer back. We don't really know. Social media wasn't a thing, so these things wouldn't necessarily be known back in the day, back in like Dale Senior's day, what restrictions were placed on drivers and stuff. But these kids today aren't going to stand for it. They're going to do what they want to do when they want to do it. And someone like the Joe Gibbs Racing organization is going to get left in the dirt, in the dust.
And we've already see it happening. And the reason we bring all this up is because Chase Elliott was snowboarding before Las Vegas. Unfortunately, apparently he snowboards a lot, which I didn't even know. He also flies planes with his dad, Bill. Unfortunately, Chase got injured, broke his leg, will be out 6 weeks. Josh Berry is going to race everything but COTA. Jordan Taylor is going to race that, and that's actually going to give him a good opportunity to get used to a Cup car before he goes and runs one in Le Mans later this year. So that's kind of what brought this whole conversation up. To be honest, you can't wrap these drivers in bubble wrap, especially when the sport they drive is probably more dangerous than the snowboarding, if we're going to be honest. Ryan Newman almost didn't walk away from Daytona 500 a few years ago. And that's with all the safety systems we've got in place. So I don't think we can just sit these guys in the corner and think they're not going to get hurt, because they could literally get hurt anytime. And it's just, look, they've got the waiver. Chase is going to win a race, they'll probably make the playoffs. So there's not really anything to be concerned about. But I would be concerned if my name was Chase Briscoe, Austin Dillon, and Tyler Reddick. They have had not that great starts to the season, as Reddick is 34th in points, Austin Dillon is 26th, and Chase Briscoe is 32nd. I am not worried that these drivers are in trouble, because remember, one win turns your whole season around, but they might want to start to get going, because you don't want to wait and be in a lot of situations where you're going into the summer and you're desperate to get a win. You want to knock this out about now-ish, so you're only worried about stacking points for the playoffs and not trying to get into the playoffs.
Yeah. And, we can compare these three drivers race for multi-team organizations. So, just kind of a quick look around, so to speak. You've got Chase Briscoe, who's Stuart Haas. So you've got Kevin Harvick sitting third in points, which he's kind of sneakily up there, Darryl. We haven't really seen a whole lot of him, but he's putting together. He's got 2 top 10s, a top 5. Consistency is key. And I'm just going to kind of jump back over into a different part of our spreadsheet here and go find Kevin. And
well, look at where Ross is. Ross hasn't won a race, but he's also got a top 5, 2 top 10s, and 3 stage wins.
Yeah.
So
and
that
Kevin
consistency thing.
And Kevin's got he's getting stage points every week too, but then you jump down and the rest of Stuart Haas, they're not really they're in the top 20. Actually, I think I have to drop down to maybe it's worse than I thought. Eric Amarola in 21st. Is that really the next car?
Yeah, that team outside of Kevin Harvick has not been good to start the season.
Yeah, because Priest is in 31st. Yeah, so Stuart Haas picking up where they left off last year, I guess.
Yeah, which was Kevin Harvick doing great and everybody else just kind of there.
Yeah, so maybe with the Stuart Haas, maybe we have reason to worry. But Austin Dillon, same thing. You've got Austin in 26th. You've got Kyle Busch in 8th with a win. There's definitely discrepancy there. And then Tyler Reddick, you've got Bubba, who is in 16th. So, but Bubba's not had the best shake to start his season off either. He had that DNF in Daytona. Yep. But he's actually climbed up. He gained 10 points 10 places in the standings this past week, Darryl. He was 26th. He's up to 16th. And he has been trending up since Daytona. Not hard to do when you DNF, to be honest with you.
And he had a good race at Auto Club going until all the crap got packed in to the got packed in the radiator, which probably affected the handling. He ran top 10 for most of that race as well. He ran top 10 all day, except for a couple of laps in Las Vegas. That team, they were developing. And they really came on the second half of that season. They're starting to pick up where they left off. They just got to get the finishes to match. And they're heading to Phoenix, where they've gotten the top 10 before. Or Bubba's gotten the top 10 there before. So you're hoping they have a good race. But I think all 3 of these drivers will get it turned around. I mean, Tyler Reddick just had bad luck getting caught up in other people's messes. But they've got to turn around quickly if they want to do anything this year.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying I would absolutely agree with you. There's always a couple drivers at the beginning of the year who we say don't start out great, but like you said, it takes one win and your whole season's completely changed. You could be 31st in the regular season championship, which we're obviously referencing here when we say Kyle Busch is in 8th. If we're talking playoffs, he's second. Mm-hmm. Or don't, yeah. Well, he's tied for second with Ricky But yeah, I mean, one win changes your season around. And so these guys are far from out. Last year we had 19 unique winners, I think it was. Um, so we'll see. There's a lot of racing left to go yet, though.
Yep. And I don't know if we're going to get those 16 unique. We would have had 16 if Kurt Busch didn't get concussed, but we will see what happens the rest of this season. There's plenty of chances for guys to get some wins, but you got to get them early. I think trying to wait till late when everybody's the most aggressive is not going to end that great. And Las Vegas, there was a lot of conversation about this race and the mile-and-a-half package again. It was a lot cooler than the last time we raced there in Las Vegas, a lot more grip in the car or in the track for these cars, so there wasn't as much passing as we're used to now with the Gen 7. It was a fine race, not a great race, but I don't think it's a cause for concern or to start burying NASCAR or the package. Every race isn't going to be a barn burner. Some races are just going to be fine, and we just have to deal with that.
And fine races are okay. There's nothing wrong with a fine race. Because you know what a fine race is better than? A bad race, which this was not.
Yeah, this definitely was not a bad race. Although it may have been bad TV. Because we already know Fox has had issues with showing a lot of the battles.
Yeah, which Bahrain wasn't great TV either.
Yes.
Actually, the most interesting race of the whole weekend we haven't even talked about yet.
We're going to get to that in a minute because IndyCar, St. Pete either nothing happens or everything happens. And when we get to it, which will be here in a few minutes, everything happened this week, including a couple of cars going airborne.
And actually, Grosjean, talking about airborne, Grosjean became a pilot in the offseason and flew himself into St. Pete's.
That's really cool.
He went the Chase Elliott route.
Yes. So everybody's getting in on the podcast thing, and now NBC has their own podcast for NASCAR. Kyle Petty was on it, and he had some interesting things to say about Ryan Blaney. Called him the new Casey Kane. I'll read you the entire quote. Ryan Blaney is the new Casey Kane, potential unfulfilled. Everybody wants to talk about what he can do, but he never does anything. Let's go look at Kyle Petty's stats real quick while we're sitting here.
While you're pulling those up, Darryl, I do want to say that he's not completely off base.
He's not.
Right? He's not completely off base. However, him delivering that assessment is off base. Yeah. I don't think it would be as insulting if he didn't say, if he just said he's the new Ryan Blaney, or Ryan Blaney's the new Casey Kane, right? Tons of potential and doesn't always get the results. But that's not what he said. He not only did he push the dagger in, but he gave it a twist at the end. That potential unfulfilled, everybody wants to talk about what he can do, but he never does anything. That is insult to injury.
Yeah. And this is from a guy who in 829 races and 30 years in the sport got 8 poles, 8 wins, and 173 top 10s. Ryan Blaney's career stats. I'm going to bring those up while we're sitting here. Blaney has run in 273 races, has 7 wins and 9 poles.
How many top 10s?
114 and 61 top 5s. So my question is, if Ryan Blaney is potential unfulfilled, what does that make Kyle Petty?
Yeah. That makes Kyle Petty an a-hole.
Yeah. Folks in glass houses should not be throwing stones. It's more about the messenger than the message. Yes, Ryan Blaney probably hasn't won as much as he should have. But here's the thing. He's been in contention for a lot of wins. Just things at the end of the races have not gone his way. And unfortunately, in 2022, he was in position to win a lot of races and just couldn't seal the deal, which led to his first winless season since 2016, which is the first year he ran full-time in Cup. I don't think it's over for Ryan. It is a disappointment after he won 3 races in 2021, but I think there's still a chance for him to win a championship. He's just got to get the luck.
And Ryan started out at Wood Brothers too.
Yeah.
Which you start at a disadvantage. That's like starting at Petty, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're close to the big dogs. You're kind of tied to them, but you aren't the big dog.
Right. I mean, Ryan's going to have his chances this year, but Kyle Petty should not be making those comments. Because, dude, the only reason you even have a TV career is because your last name. Like, you are the definition of nepotism, baby, in NASCAR. You shouldn't be talking that much about everybody else.
Yeah. And I think the only reason it's being tolerated is because at the end of the day, it's not an unfair statement to make. Mm-hmm. The way he made it and the words he chose were bad, but he wasn't saying that about Chase Elliott before he was getting all of his wins. Mm-hmm. Nobody was really saying that about Chase Elliott. But you get some other buddy who, I mean, Dave Blaney, obviously, pretty well-known racer, but he's not Bill Elliott for sure. Your last name counts for something, especially in a sport like NASCAR. Your last name carries a lot of weight. But Kyle Petty wouldn't be saying that about Dale Jr. back when he was going through all of his rough patches, which he had multiple throughout his career. He wouldn't have been saying that about Chase Elliott back when he was not winning and stuff like that. It's just interesting the fact that he chose to jump on Ryan Blaney right now, because we haven't even been really pegging Ryan Blaney to win or really do anything so far this season. I mean, Las Vegas, we always count him in because back in 2020, he had a good run there, but I just don't know why we're already throwing him under the bus 3 races in this season. It's a little early, in my opinion.
It's just, I mean, this is the same guy that thought Bubba Wallace should be suspended for the rest of the season for something that a lot of folks have not been suspended for. So, Kyle doesn't always have the greatest opinions, but at least he's consistent. About as consistent as he was on the racetrack. Anyway, Chicago. We're supposed to have this street race in July. I don't think that's going to be happening. Ever since that race was signed in Chicago, there's been a huge brouhaha with the Chicago City Council about the contract involving that race, and the Taste of Chicago Festival is now the newest wrinkle in that, because that was also scheduled to be in Grant Park this year. That is now having to be moved to the pier, which has caused a lot of furor in Chicago and has led to claims that Grant Park is being privatized during the summer. Now, there's also a mayoral candidate, because Lori Lightfoot lost the runoff, Brandon Johnson, who is giving a lot of thought or giving a lot of signals that if he gets in, NASCAR's not going to be racing here that often or for that long or at all at this point, because the new mayor gets installed in May. The race is in July. And I don't put it past a new mayor who looks at that contract and says, you know what, we don't actually want this race, and the city council that really doesn't want the race, to go and rip up the contract and deal with the lawsuit later. This is the problem with street races that you don't have with permanent road course races. You are beholden to a lot of politics. And Chicago politics is a nightmare. And unfortunately, NASCAR might be the next victim of it with this race. So my question to you, Chris, is do you think we're even going to have this race? Because I don't think we will.
I don't know. We'll have to pay attention over the next couple weeks here and see. But yeah, I mean, right now, obviously, the rumor mill is flying, and suggesting that we won't have the race. We'll see. To be honest with you, I wasn't excited about this race to begin with. I think it's going to be boring, and realistically, I'd rather see him do the Nashville road course that Indy does. I think that's a better road course anyway.
I don't know. IndyCar can barely finish their races on time there, so I don't even know if NASCAR would be able to do it.
Well, you'd have to shorten it down, which would be no one would like. They'd all cry about it. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't like road courses. Really, the only road course that's truly enjoyable to watch is Baku. And it's I think NASCAR on a road course or in a street course is a terrible idea. It's going to be boring. So losing this race really isn't any skin off my back. I'd actually be happy to see us lose that race.
Here's what I would say: start getting Chicagoland ready, and get ready to go back there because this ain't happening. Just gonna put that out there. Also, before we go to break, Kimi Räikkönen going to be back. He's going to be driving the 91 for Trackhouse Racing at COTA, and Jenson Button is going to run 3 races in the NASCAR Cup Series, including COTA, in a Rick Ware prepared car, or a Rick Ware car prepared by Stuart Haas. So that's going to be a lot of fun getting 2 Formula F1 champions out on the grid.
Imagine a Rick Ware prepared Stuart Haas car. It probably wouldn't be any worse than a Stuart Haas car prepared.
They'd be about the same pace at this point, unless it's being driven by Kevin Harvick. So,
ain't that the truth? Although Cody Ware's higher in the standings than 2 of the Stuart Haas cars.
That is a weird sentence to say in 2023. I don't think it'll stay that way, but that is a weird thought.
Yeah. Cody Ware, 29th. Ryan Preece, 31. Chase Briscoe, 32.
Yep. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk IndyCar. But before we get to that, our Rolex 24 winner got in some serious trouble. Talk about that on the other side of this break here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, everybody? This is Taryn Rodriguez. Are you a fan of volleyball? Are you a fan of Thunderous Spikes? Then I have the show for you. Set Point, where I cover NCAA men's and women's volleyball, high school boys and girls volleyball, beach volleyball, and even professional volleyball. Catch the action every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
It's IE Sports Radio. It is your direct feed for all that is sports. It is Philly Sports Talk with Cash and Chris every Tuesday night right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Philly Sports Talk with Cash and Chris, the most comprehensive view on Philadelphia sports exclusively right here on IE Sports Radio. You know what it is, your direct feed for all that is sports. Tuesday night, IE Sports Radio, Philly Sports Talk with Cash and Chris.
And we're back here on IE Sports Radio, your feed for all that is sports. Darryl and Chris here with you this evening, getting into our final segment. Going to get into IndyCar, but first, before we get to that, there has been a massive penalty that came down for Michael Shank Racing in the Rolex 24 as they were caught manipulating the tire data the tire pressure data that was sent to IMSA. HBD actually found out about the fault when they were looking through their systems and actually reported it to IMSA. So Meyer Shank Racing lost all the points from the race, lost all the prize money, got a 200-point penalty, and have to pay a massive fine. They get to keep the win and the watches, but that's about it. Now, Chris, I've heard of teams getting called out for cheating by other teams. I've never heard the actual manufacturer of the car calling out their race winner for cheating. That's a new one for me.
Yeah. That's one of those, it's bad moments, right? Mm-hmm. If one of your suppliers, and it doesn't matter what supply it is, right? If someone is distancing themselves from you that publicly, you screwed up big time.
Yep.
And you got to live with those consequences. I don't think that it was just some random rogue employee like they're trying to kind of pass it off as. Sure, one employee probably did it, or a small a small faction, but they didn't just do that because they've said, it'd be cool if we did that.
Yeah.
Right. That came from somewhere. And so
I wonder who, but my thing is, why would you risk the win like that? That'd be my question.
People do stupid stuff every day, Darryl.
You are not wrong.
People do stupid stuff every day.
Well, it costs an engineer his job. He no longer works there, but...
And he was the scapegoat.
Yep. And probably for the team, because Honda was not playing that.
No.
And so we'll see what happens with Michael Shank this week, or next week.
They probably aren't playing so nice behind the scenes. I'm
Absolutely
sure
not.
They do not buy MSR's excuse or their actions. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more behind the scenes that the public never hears about, but
they probably got an earful.
Yes.
That phone call was probably loud.
Yeah. Yes.
So hopefully they will.
I would rather be Total Wolf's earpiece than in on that phone call.
Yeah. And the NHRA will be going to Gainesville this week for the actual Gator Nationals. They're going to be happening here in March 9th through the 12th. Check out, if you can, NHRA.tv. They have a single event pass. You can watch the entire event. I'm thinking of actually picking that up tomorrow to watch the race live. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, probably not this week because I have to go take photos. I'm not going to have time to actually sit down and watch it. They have a $24.99 weekly pass if you want to stream the NHRA race. But I would say check it out. We're going to have all the basically all the categories starting off at the same time. Pro Mod going to be involved. Pro Stock Bike also going to be racing. Kelly Klontz is down there this weekend. Maryland native. And, of course, in the top fuel categories, Brittany Force going for that third championship, and that was a mean and consistent car in the preseason test Monday through Wednesday. They got a good chance of doubling up, and of course, in Pro Stock Car, Erica Enders, 5-time champion, spanked the field last year. If they let her get off to a hot start, they are in trouble. But you can watch the replay on Fox or check it out on NHRA.tv to watch live as the event happens. Make sure you guys check it out whenever you get a chance. I definitely will try to check it out on Sunday before the Cup Series race gets going in Phoenix. So let's go ahead and get to this IndyCar race. And Chris, I think we can charitably call this race a demo derby. There was a lot of torn up carbon fiber.
I tell you what, and it started a quarter of the way through lap 1.
Mm-hmm. Had a big time pile up. 5 or 6 cars got included, and poor Santino Ferrucci got T-boned in that race after the accident. And you watch that wreck from Connor Daly's camera. He's sitting there. Peterson just slams into him, and the car just jumps 20 feet in the air. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Kyle Kirkwood also went flying in that race after a restart. I don't know if these guys were just amped up to go after the winter, but there was a lot of mistakes by drivers and a lot of Indy cars leaving the ground on Sunday.
Yeah, and from what I understand, Kyle Kirkwood was actually fined by the FAA for not having tail numbers on his car.
You know, he finished that race, by the way.
And it's crazy that he did, because remember last year at Spa, I think. Remember how Lewis hit just the back end of his car, went like almost over the top of the car, and then it slammed down.
Yes.
We saw that basically twice this week in IndyCar. How these guys can just finish that race out is incredible.
Ferrucci's car, unfortunately, was too badly damaged. I don't know how they got Kirkwood's car fixed.
I don't know either. And really, how was it not damaged beyond repair? Because that wasn't a graceful flight that he had. That was quite an impact, both the takeoff and the landing.
Yeah, that looked like it hurt. But thankfully, he is okay. No one involved in the accident was injured, thank goodness. We go to Texas coming up in about a month or so, which they've got to find a second race in March, because you kind of lose all your momentum starting now, and then you're off for a month. But I think with all the damage, they could use it.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see Sonoma when it's green.
It would be nice to actually go there when the grass is green. We never see it when it was green. And It would be nice to actually go there.
Yeah.
And that was lap 32 when Kirkwood went flying. He was involved in an incident with Jack Harvey and Augustin I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name. Augustin, sorry.
Canapino?
Also involved. Yeah, Canapino was also involved in that accident. Thankfully, Kirkwood was okay, but the 30 was unable to continue. But another accident, this was a big one. After the final pit stops, Roman Grosjean is running for the win, going against Scott McLaughlin. They go into turn 4. They both end up going in the barriers and out of the race. And there was a lot of conversation about who was at fault. The two drivers talked it out, and they were friends. They were friends after. We'll see how that goes the rest of the season. But honestly, I think it was just a racing incident. You know, things happen, especially when you're racing for the win. Neither was going to give up that corner, and they ended up in the wall.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And this wouldn't be an issue if McLaughlin didn't get held up behind that lap car.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was And Darryl, I think were you watching by this point, or
Yeah, I was watching by this time.
so they were playing the who's going to flinch first, going in and getting their last set of tires, their last pit stop. Who's going in first? And uh, Grosjean was in second, McLaughlin first. Grosjean pulls in to go second, or pulls in to do the pit stop first. And I think it's because they saw that lap car and they went for the undercut. They said he's going to get held up, no chance he doesn't, and we're going to be right there to grab the lead. And they almost were. They really, if you're listening and you did not see the video of McLaughlin like a rocket ship going out of that pit lane because he got held up, and they're right there neck and neck. They got that quick right hander, and then it's that long straight down to that 90-degree. Well, not a 90, but it's kind of a weird 90, and then it cuts back left, so it's almost more like a chicane than anything. But that was just a racing incident because that was the win. Mm-hmm. Those two last pit stops, you're on your final set of tires, and whoever comes out of that corner in first wins the race. No doubt in my mind, no doubt in anybody's mind. And those two drivers, neither one were giving an inch. And McLaughlin had those fresh tires. They're cold. Should he have known better? Yes. Should he have anticipated the fact that he was not going to stop like he was used to? Yes. But at the same time, he's a driver going for a win, the first win of the year. And, we always get pulled back to the ever famous quote: if you're a racing driver and you see a gap and you don't go for it, you're not a racing driver. Anybody rolls reverse, Grosjean takes that inside, he overdrives it right into McLaughlin. It's just one of those racing deals. It was unfortunate because my nearest the win got screwed over on that one. And
it has not been a fun start to nearest the win for you.
No, this week actually really wasn't bad. I think I only picked up 29 points or something like that, which is a win when you consider the fact that we were picking three races this week. So,
and Pato O'Ward had an opportunity to win that race, and it comes off turn 4. Or not turn 4. Comes off the final turn. 2 laps to go. Hits the pit limiter. Slows down the car enough for Marcus Ericsson to get by and take the win. Ericsson, Award, Dixon were your top 3. But that is a gut punch for Pato, who really had that race in the bag until that accident, or to that incident.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's racing though, right? I mean, it happens, and every year, someone makes a boneheaded mistake. We had Lewis with the magic button a couple years ago, and these things just happen, and it's how you adapt and get past them and try to not do it again, really, is what it comes down to. No one's beating himself up more than Pato O'Ward is. No one's, that's who's taking it the hardest other than anybody, because he cost himself the win. It wasn't Ericsson just had that much better of a drive or was going to get there. He made a mistake and it cost him. He's the one that's losing sleep over it.
Yes. And he'll have an opportunity to redeem himself in a month, but he's going to be replaying the end of that race a lot in the next 24 or in the next 23 days until we get to Texas. Hopefully that is a good race. They're going to run some top line practice there to get that rubbered in. I hope that works, because Texas was a really good race for IndyCar, and then most recently it has not been that great. So Hopefully it will be repaired when we go this week, or not this week, next month in April. We go to Texas for the, Firestone, for the PPG 375. But now it's time for Nearest the Win, and we are going to Phoenix. And the key to Phoenix is, obviously this is going to be the race where it's done to death, but then when we race here the second time, it'll be for the championship. But this is where you're going to see who is the best with their short track and flat track programs, which always seems to throw a couple of teams a curveball. But we do know last couple of races here have been the Fords, Joey Logano, Chase Briscoe, last two Fords to win here at this track. And as we're going in, I'm going to take a Ford. I'm taking Joey Logano to win this week. Chris, who you got?
You're not taking Joey Logano.
No, I'm taking Kevin Harvick. Sorry.
Oh my gosh!
I was reading Auto Club. I wasn't paying attention. I'm taking Kevin Harvick this week.
I'm taking Joey Logano this week.
Yes.
And as I look across the boards, Ford is a popular pick this week, Darryl. Specifically, Kevin Harvick. We got three people picking Kevin Harvick this week.
Yep, Matt White and Larry B also taking Kevin Harvick, so the IE Sports Radio curse might be in effect there. Christopher Bell is being taken by Taryn, and Michael is taking Ross Chastain this week. That's the only race we've got this week. If you still want to compete, get your picks in by the end, or really by the start of the NASCAR race on Sunday. That's all I really need to do for this week, of course. That's the only race we've got this week. And
3:30.
Yep, starts at 3:30. Still got time to get in. The current point standings going into this week, I still lead with 55, and then it is a log jam for second. Michael currently is in second with 94. Larry B, third with 95. Taryn's got 96. Chris has got 97. And Matt White has 113 points. Remember, we're doing this golf style, so lowest score wins. And honestly, we're still really early into this. Anything can happen. So
You're one DNF away from a Matt White type of weekend where Matt White gained. He went into the weekend with 59 points. He came out with 113. I think it ended up being like a 74-point gain for Matt White over the weekend. Unfortunate picks with he actually picked Max, so he was the only one to pick a race winner this week. But you get Joey Logano finishing 36 and Joseph Newgarden finishing 17. I mean, that's a lot of points pick up. And
so we'll see. Hopefully we won't have as many issues this week. At least I'm hoping.
I hope. Yeah. You finally snagged the lead. Michael was in lead for 2 weeks, courtesy of us, by the way.
Yeah, we kind of picked that lead for him.
And then the first week he comes back and picks, he ends up. Michael was the one that picked up. He picked up 72 points this week. Went from 22 points to 94. That's painful.
So we will see how things go this week. Good luck to all of your picks this week. But it is time to wave the checkered flag for this episode of the Extra Mile. Remember, I'm at DK Jr. 12. Chris is at Fiji Sims. And if you want to check out all our social medias, make sure you check out Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok as well. And keep it locked to all the iSports media socials as well. And check out iSportsRadio.com. Check out all of our shows. Pick up some swag. Join the Patreon. And if you've missed any episode of any iSports Radio show, you can check it out wherever podcasts can be heard, and the YouTube repository as well, which has a copy of every show we have ever done. So that'll wrap it up for this episode of The Extra Mile. For Chris, I'm Darryl. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you at the next green flag. Good night, everybody.